Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming to this exciting panel here. We have an esteemed group of 3 panelists here. We have the topic, Plate to Prosperity, the food sector's role in economic and national security. So, in recent years, we've seen how food has become more than nourishment. It's now a pillar of resilience, industry, and sovereignty. The UAE's food security strategy captures this shift, treating food as strategic infrastructure, essential to economic diversification and national stability. So in the next few minutes, we're going to be exploring how smarter investment, better data, and innovative technologies can make food systems more resilient, not just for the UAE, but for the wider region. So I'm excited here for an exceptional panel here representing international organizations, industry, and the private sector. And so I would like to actually kick it off by asking all of the panelists first to very quickly introduce themselves and highlight what's the specific angle in which they're approaching food systems. We'll start maybe with Abhay.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, and I think you brought a very interesting term there on strategic infrastructure. That's interesting to hear it from that way. So very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abhay. I'm the Managing Director for Frost & Sullivan Middle East. We're a global consulting firm headquartered out of the US, and we do extensive amount of work advising companies across the value chain, looking at food amongst other industries and talking about anything around feasibility, viability, opportunities, technology, etc. That's my play here. I'll be looking at this panel, trying to bring in inputs from perspectives on value chain technology and opportunities.
Thank you. Nadine?
Yeah, I think, is it on?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nadine Gbossa. I'm the Director of Food Systems at the International Fund for Agricultural Development. What it means, the International Fund for Agricultural Development that we call IFAD is actually a United Nations fund, an international financial institution, which provides financing, investment, technical assistance to government, private sector organization to invest in food systems, in basically from production to transport to marketing to storage to processing. And we do that putting a special emphasis on small and medium enterprise, supporting them in low and middle income countries, because this is the segment of the food and beverage private sector which is facing the most challenges in accessing financing and investment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jens, you might want to move the mic a bit closer.
Hello, my name is Jens Michel. I'm the CEO of the Abu Dhabi Food Hub. Who don't know Abu Dhabi Food Hub, we are built in Kizad Zone. The Abu Dhabi Food Hub will be the region's next-gen premier food trade hub, connecting local growers with the region, as well as global growers and producers with the UAE and the region. We are located in Kizad Zone, which is geographically in a superior position, close to all relevant ports, airports, as well as road infrastructure. And we are building state-of-the-art facilities, ensuring cold chain integrity and enabling for digital smart solutions, transparency and trade going forward.
Amazing, thank you. So we'd like to dive in terms of framing the challenge here. Abhay, from Frost & Sullivan's perspective, what do you see as the largest issues impacting food security today on a global level? And what are the biggest opportunities there from an innovation and investment standpoint?
Okay, well, again, interesting prompt, and I'll probably break it into the challenges first and park opportunities later, or I'll be hogging the limelight here. Look, I think challenges-wise, if I was to lay it really simply, and my fellow panelists here may do a better job at bringing in the true equations, food is scarce, right? It's not enough. And we know that. I mean, globally, there are different measures. You've got indices that talk about, food accessibility, for example, right? Availability, affordability, and we've got countries faring differently across it. But I mean, that if we go down to the basics, you're talking about food getting aggressively impacted by climate change, for one, right? That's a massive issue out there. There is the issue around water scarcity, and I've talked in the past about the energy and environment nexus, and you talk about food and water. I think it's a challenge that's going around. And then on the other side, you've got issues around, in this region especially, right? The tackling the issues of desertification, for example, right? Or the depletion of soil quality not meeting up with enough around agriculture, for example. So again, I think it's the whole question about the extent to which you're resilient to being impacted by the environmental factors on one side. On the other side, and you can go with any kind of statistics, you got food imports at the moment in the GCC anywhere between 75% to 85%, depending on who you want to believe. To me, if I look at the panel and the context of resilience, I think the food imports dependency would probably be the single largest challenge that this region needs to address, right? And that's where the opportunity lies. The opportunity is then around how do we, kind of get more done across the value chain within our countries, right? How do we create the right ecosystem to bring that in? And I think Jens was giving some interesting insights on that. So I think it's, I'd park it at that. Addressing the challenge of, let's say, tackling the problem of excessive imports and creating opportunities through import substitution.
Amazing, thank you. Nadine, we had an interesting conversation there in the back in terms of how do we rally youth entrepreneurship and how do we perhaps harness, the power of the private sector more broadly, not just looking at, big corporates, but also maybe smallholder farmers and SMEs. Maybe you can comment a bit on, how that is a great opportunity for solving some of these challenges.
Yes, indeed, it's a very fascinating topic. The youth agro-entrepreneur in the food sector. I mean, there's so much. I always say that the food sector is a captive market. Everybody should be entitled to food in the world. So you are talking of everybody eats. So it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge market. And what we see in different regions in the world, but the one I come from, is to see how we see the youth engaging in the food sector. There's been a traditional vision that the youth don't want to engage in agriculture. It is not something they want to do. It's backward. It's going to the field. But I'm here with colleagues, and we organize an engagement with the youth agro-entrepreneur in Africa. And you see this new generation, educated, bold, tech-savvy, business-minded. And they know there's a huge business opportunity in the agri-food sector, which is expected to generate trillions in the Africa region in the coming years. And they want to be part of that opportunity. They want to capture their market share, but they're asking for a fair ground, a fair opportunity. And they tell us when we discuss that, when we talk about attracting the private sector, government talk about this facilitating, de-risking, they always talk about, I was saying foreign companies, but my colleague here reminded me of multinational, of foreign investment, and they said, we are the domestic private sector. And what about making it easy for us, giving us access, basically engaging us on the same playing ground, and also with facilities that you give to the foreign sector. And they are not waiting for this opportunity. You see these enterprises have started, they are excited, they are making money, they are making income, but they want to go at scale, and they want to be able to engage with the leaders. At the same time, foreign and multinational companies are giving the same opportunities and giving the same attention, because we believe that this is where some of the transformation if not most of the transformation, will come in the coming decades from these young entrepreneurs who are really ready to capture this market and make a difference in the way food security is handled in some of the developing or low and middle income countries.
Amazing, thank you. Jens, maybe based on the work that you're doing with the Abu Dhabi Food Hub, how can nations like the UAE strike the right balance between food self-sufficiency and global trade realities?
It's a critical question, particularly for countries that have insufficient arable land or challenging access to the resources that you require to grow produce. The UAE imports well over 85% of its products, so we are very import dependent. We evolving over the recent years anyway, very strongly in domestic production. Your company is one of those examples, and making an impact and continue to grow at 4 to 5% of CAGR every year in terms of output. Is that going to be sufficient in the near-term future by 2030 or 2050 to have a complete self-sustainable and independent food ecosystem domestic? It is a long journey, and in the meantime, it's important to find the right balance. And the balance is not to focus on being immediately self-sufficient. The balance is building the balance in trade, enabling the local farmers, providing market access to the local domestic market via hubs, for instance, within the Abu Dhabi Food Hub, a trade framework and ecosystem that connects our growers here in the UAE with retail, with wholesale, with HoReCa, and with food service, but at the same time also enables regional exports into neighboring countries, and balancing this out with the needed and necessities of international import coming to the UAE going forward. So in essence, it's not about being completely independent from imports. They will always be required one way or another, given the heritage we are having here geographically as well as from a climate perspective, but building that balance. And at Abu Dhabi Food Hub, that trade ecosystem we are building will enable both of it and create that balance, so we successfully are able to actually creating that food security and building the food security ambition out that we are all aiming for here as part of this food forum as well.
Amazing, and I think this is a great segue into the next question around data, financing, and market intelligence, because when we come to the topic of enabling self-sufficiency, enabling local production, but also ensuring, right, that global trade happens smoothly and is open and transparent, it's good to understand how data and technology, right, plays into that. So maybe we can actually start with you, Nadine, this time. Given your work at IFAD, how can better financial intelligence, knowing who invests, where, and with what impact, strengthen national planning, especially as it relates to the food sector?
Yes. Allow me to go back to, in terms of market intelligence or financial intelligence, to something Jens just said. Basically, it's about, as you say, finding the balance between what can be produced locally and what can be also brought to trade through the international trade. And you mentioned, taking the example of the UAE, of the availability of arable land and also of the capacity, and how do you compensate for that? From the region I come from, Africa, everybody knows that 60% of the arable land today is in Africa. It is also, as I was mentioning, making the connection with the youth agenda. This is a huge opportunity to connect, because here is an area where you have the land, you are talking about the market, and I was telling you about this young entrepreneur looking at the domestic market, but looking also at the export market as an opportunity. So this is also where the first intelligence is the market. So here you do have a market, a demand, and on the other side, you have the arable land, you have the people, you have the opportunity, but you lack the partnership, the access to finance, to investment. So these are the kind of things We are talking about where, as Jen is saying, it's about what can be done locally and what can be also complemented internationally. And going back to the issue of financial intelligence, we basically help governments in this country to say, okay, you have set up your priorities, which your priority might be to invest in infrastructure to render this, in order to basically provide the investment needed in the land and making it profitable, because there's some of the money which must be public investment. And so we work with some government. I take the example of the government of Niger. Just like here, we are facing the desertification. We need to invest in connecting with the market. We need to invest in irrigation. We need to invest in storage infrastructure to make it attractive to the private sector. And of course, in terms of land restoration, land management, water management, the government says if we don't invest in this, we cannot hope to develop the food industry, but also attract more investment. And the financial intelligence we do with them is to, for the first time, to be able to map their food system investment and look at where is the money going. And as we say, perception is not reality. I was talking with the Minister of Agriculture, and he was telling me, I'm so frustrated that I think a lot of money is going into food assistance, into social investment, which is needed to meet immediate needs, but does not provide the productive base to move into investment. And then we look at with them and we realize that, first of all, most of the money is not going to social assistance, but it's actually going to infrastructure. And he was surprised because it was a perception. But then we also help them to say, yes, you invest in infrastructure, but everything related to sustainability and environment, which you've put as your first priority, only receive 3% of the foreign or the domestic investment, while you told us it's the top priority. And this generates a lot of debates within the government on national budget and with partners to say, we said it should be sustainability and environment. This is where we put the least investment. We thought it was food assistance, but actually it's infrastructure. And then this financial intelligence allows them to better understand where the money is going, where it should go, and is the money meeting priorities, and have a more informed dialogue also with the partners and investors.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Abhay,
Yep.
how is Frost & Sullivan, or say other groups from the private sector, contributing to this
Yep.
data transparency and financing and market intelligence aspect?
I think, look, I'll split this into two mindsets. One, what Nadine just talked about, right, is the mindset of the government, right, where they're trying to look at understanding what should they promote and where should the money go, right? And that's where, when you talk about data and financial intelligence, it's important for them to really discover the gap, right? What's truly missing, but more importantly, what's the capability in the country, right? Not every country can produce everything, right? Not every country can successfully go and do livestock or go into, let's say, hydroponics, etc., right? So it's important to understand the capability that they have and that they could build, right? Evaluate the trade-offs, which are then in terms of emissions, in terms of, in terms of energy impact, right? In terms of water requirements, which are critical, no matter what part of the food value chain you work in, right? And then access to technology. Build those data sets and then decide what are the opportunities worth promoting across the value chain, right? And that's something that we're seeing extensively done here in the UAE. UAE's been a proponent for building clusters, building ecosystems that focus on aspects that could give you competitive advantage, and that makes sense from a national resilience. And that's where a lot of intelligence is going in and advice is going in. But then you shift to the mindset of investors, companies that are in the food value chain and that are trying to figure out what to do. And I think that's where the function of intelligence is really around what's the size of the opportunity, right? What kind of support am I going to get in terms of incentives, in terms of support mechanisms from the government or promoters here, right? What extent of financing do I have available? But then it's also important to look at understanding the risks and the challenges, right? And often we find that there's a severe there's a severe lack of intelligence, especially when you start looking at the Middle East, Africa region, right? If I compare it to Europe, there's so much that's made available for people that it's much easier to go in and start doing business. And I take a look at the Horizon Initiative, for example, where so much new technology is getting developed. And that's just happening because there's a whole bunch of intelligence being made available to people. And there's clarity on what kind of funding you could get if you go in and invest in something there, right? So I think there's good success stories, on leveraging intelligence in the right way. We're seeing the UAE do a fair bit of it, but I think there's still room for more to happen.
Thank you. Jens, we talked about how the Abu Dhabi Food Hub is this data-native platform for trade and infrastructure in the food space. Can you talk a bit more about how you're contributing then, to these aspects, both locally, regionally, and globally?
Yeah. I think just linking with the investor angle as an example, and investments in agri-food and agriculture are long-term investments, capital intense, where the investors need aspects and need visibility. The reason why we build digitally native is we want to enable, first thing, clarity around how is our product going to flow to market? How is our product going to be handled? At what quality is it going to be handled? How do we, at the end, are able to commercialize it? The second part is, for me, transparency. Through being digitally native, nowadays, the tools are available to build from the get-go an ecosystem that embraces the digital features that provide the transparency of trade, whether this is pricing transparency, logistics transparency, capacity transparency. All of this will lead to efficiencies which bring the cost of trade down, make it more efficient. Therefore, the route to market will be more profitable or cost-saving. And as a result of all of that, that builds trust. That builds trust with the investors, that builds trust with the executors of the agricultural land, that builds trust with the associated framework, which are all our buyers in retail, HoReCa, food service, etc., that will absorb the product, that will buy the product because of that transparency. And from a food hub perspective, from an Abu Dhabi food perspective, this is part of our core pillars on how we will enable that trade. Besides all the infrastructure that is state-of-the-art, the location, the global connectivity. But this is one of our core pillars.
Amazing. Thank you. Nadine, can you tell us more about the 3FS initiative and how it's mapping resource flows across food systems? What key trends or gaps beyond the ones already discussed has IFAD identified?
Yes, I can speak about it, and also the link with the transparency, and we call it the mutual accountability agenda. When we talk about transparency and also we bring it accountability for the kind of food that is being produced, whether in terms of climate footprint, in terms of nutrition, in terms of fair incomes and living conditions. This is also the kind of traceability people are asking for. Okay, and coming again from the United Nations, we also have a role in terms of looking into this data, and I would encourage you to look at a very interesting report, which is from the World Benchmarking Alliance, which basically look at the 350 food companies in the world, which hold about 50% of the market, of the food market. And this will be interesting to see how the UAE fetches in that, because it's basically, and I'm just going to make it flat because it varies, but you will see that about 80% of the biggest food companies in the world do not meet climate and sustainability requirements, meaning that they do not have climate goals. Also, about 80% of them do not have nutritious food goals. over 80% of them do not have goals in terms of providing decent incomes and working conditions, knowing that in the food sectors, this is where you have the majority of the poor people working in factories, in the field, in transport industries, that the people who are the worst paid in the world. So when we talk about traceability, it's not only about traceability of financing and investment, but it's also about what kind of food industry do we have today, and how do we hold them also accountable while allowing them to make the profit and the benefits they are entitled to make. And this is where, with the UAE emerging as a global leader in the food industry, my questions will be, which kind of food industry are we talking about? Are you going to be among the 20% of the companies which are paying attention to the climate footprints, nutritious food, working condition, decent wages? That it's something also that's the kind of food industry people are asking for today, and that would make a difference in the world. And when we look at the 3FS, which is tracking financial flows to food systems, it's basically tracking which kind of investments are being made. Are the money going more towards climate resilient sustainability? Is it going towards nutrition? Is it going towards infrastructure? Where is the money going? And you realize that the data shows that the money is not going where people say it should go. And this is, if I can say, a baseline for decision makers from the private sector and the public sector to kind of rethink is, are we investing the right way, in the right place, and with the right level of resources?
Amazing, thank you. Abhay, I'd like to ask you as well to kind of build on maybe what you mentioned earlier, but what factors will most influence future investment decisions in the agri-food sector? We talked a little bit about, the global challenges around water scarcity, climate change, the whole kind of food import-dependent aspect. You talked about how the private sector also needs to better understand the different trade-offs, right, between technologies or products and what are like the strong capabilities of the country, right? What are some other kind of key aspects?
So for me, I would say that for me, the single trend that's going to become overarching is going to be technology. But technology focused on outcomes of, like Nadine was saying, circularity. So I'm going a step above sustainability, right, and talking about the circular economy. So utilizing technology in the food sector to ensure things stay circular, okay, and for maximizing nutrition while minimizing resources. I think that's going to be the bottom line I would stick to.
Okay. Amazing. Jens, in a similar vein, how is the Abu Dhabi Food Hub making the food sector investments more commercially viable?
Very, very simple, through efficiencies. Efficiencies driven either, as I mentioned earlier, by data, by the right connectivity on logistics, supply chain, having the right connectivity to maritime, to air, to road, to rail, to shorten the route between growers to the market. Preserving nutritional values plays an important role in it. Shelf life preservation, reducing, for instance, food waste and scrappages because of ineffective shipping routes, logistics routes that disallow effective transportation from A to B. And on top of that, multiplying through the hub the potential for a grower or a marketer of food products, their exposure to the market, and actually exponentially grow their potential buyer base. And we can enable, through our logistics services, the transportation as effective as possible from A to B.
Okay, amazing. I would like to ask one more question and then a closing question, but I'd like to double click a little bit more on the environmental aspects here. There's various different statistics, but something in the range of 35 to 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions could be tied in some way, to agriculture or food production. So how do each of you approach the question of environmental sustainability here? And how does that also play a role within that context of economic and national security? How do we tie, those kind of two, the need for more food sustainably, right? And food security, food sovereignty, but how do we also do that in such a way that doesn't, negatively impact, national security in other ways, right? Through the climate lens. So maybe, I don't know, Nadine, maybe, you have some views on that.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, despite different opinions emerging in the world today, it's not, we don't have the luxury of choosing between national food security or sovereignty and sustainability. Again, because we are here also to provide this data, these statistics, this intelligence to guide the way investments are made. One has to know that food system, and most people know that, is 30% of the green gas emissions today. The way the food systems operate, from the production to the transport to the processing to the distribution, it's 1/3 of the green gas emission. And we always say that while everybody look at the sector of the energy, the sector of the transport, there's no regulation on the food sector because the lobby in the food industry are so strong that they have escaped up to now being accountable for meeting sustainability targets. And why the Secretary General of the United Nations called a food system summit is one of the issues. It was linked to the last COP, is that we can continue to dealing the sustainability agenda and the food security and the food sector. It is linked. And it has to be changed the way the food is produced because, well, food is a question of national security, but it's also a question of survival of the people and the planet. It seems like a bit political jargon, but it's a reality that we are all suffering from the climate change today. Unless the way the food is produced, transported, or consumed today is drastically changed, there's no path to change in terms of green gas emission because the food industry represents 1/3 of it. So there's no delinking of these two things. It has to be tackled together.
Amazing, thank you. Jens, how is the Abu Dhabi Food Hub showing leadership with regards to environmental sustainability and the climate agenda?
Having seen over the years, and coming from the food industry and coming from food wholesale, due to inefficiencies, whether it's in related services, government services such as customs, etc., or clearances and or logistics services, there's a lot of elements that we tackle to improve. We're working very closely with our local governments on providing fully integrated solutions on that to reduce exactly these shelf life deterioration. On top of what I said earlier, combining this with our digital assets, delivering efficient trading routes, efficient route to markets, continue the preservation of nutritional values and reduction of food waste in itself, that will play a major role for us contributing to this context.
Amazing. Thank you. Abhay, I see you were taking some notes. Maybe you have something to tell us.
Well, trying to construct my thoughts on a question that's really challenging, in my opinion, because you're really talking about trade-off of producing food versus managing the environment, and they're both compelling topics. Both are part of the UN Sustainable Goals, right? Look, I think I'd probably pick up something from what Nadine was saying, and maybe it's a bit of a different spin-off. When you talk about policies and you talk about regulations, right, I think it's important to look at maybe traceability mandates, and that's something I was commenting on earlier as well. If you have governments, you have food authorities coming in and mandating traceability that ensures that they're trying to you're starting with collecting and assessing if things are being done the right way. that's when the whole ecosystem will come in and start reporting things, right? But if you don't start with that, then any policy or mandate that you bring in may not get enforced. That's the first part. The second part, again, links to what Jens was talking about, and I firmly believe in it as well, is about minimizing waste across the food value chain. And that's where you're talking about it right from production to transportation to consumption, right, across all three pillars. How do we minimize that? And then that goes back to technology, which I was talking about earlier, right? You got aquaculture, you've got circulatory systems, right? You've got, the glass houses being used. There's a whole number of ways that you could ensure there are technologies being used for converting, for example, food waste into animal feed, right? And that's a circular element coming in. So investing in the right technologies can definitely allow you to reduce environmental impacts substantially, okay? And I think all of that should be brought in, but then you can talk about all of this, but if it isn't given the right structure, it won't work. And then that goes back to the part about traceability mandates.
Thank you. In wrapping up, I would like to ask the panelists, in one sentence, to share what do you believe is the most critical lever for achieving food system resilience and economic prosperity? So we'll go around. Maybe we'll start with you, Jens, and come back towards me.
For me, specifically, obviously, for our UAE, it's finding the right balance between nurturing and navigating the growth on local production and the relative route to market, and a flexible balance of import. That is going to be the food security element going forward. Food security is not just a defensive mechanism, it's actually enabling having continuous access to food in the country, even through crisis. And having that right balance enables the UAE going forward, in my view, to be one of the top-ranked countries in the world in terms of food security, because all the global food trade routes will, and through a majority already going through via the UAE.
Amazing, thank you. Nadine, what do you see as the critical lever?
Yeah. I think for me it's two words. It's what I would call mutual benefits, which means that it's about food security based on return on investment. You have the private sector. And at the same time, the other word you mentioned, prosperity, social, economic, environmental benefits. And these two are not opposed. They are beautiful models where they are brought together. You allow the private company to do what they are there for, meet a demand, make returns on investment, and at the same time, you have the public sector, the policies making sure that it brings benefits to the people, to the society, and it's sustainably environmentally sustainable. And I think this is still the exception. And there are many successful examples that we have to bring to scale so that it becomes the norm.
Amazing.
That's
Thank
what I would
you.
say.
Thank you so much. Abhay, how are we solving the world's problems?
I wish, but yeah, I think I would say it's on a sector like food, it's important to have a very clear demarcation between what the government does and the industry does. And as long as you got governments coming in and bringing in the right mandates, the right direction, the right policy and the infrastructure, okay, you've got the industry to take the lead role on technology, on selection of what's most appropriate where, and ensuring the right supply hits the ground wherever it's needed.
Amazing, thank you. So thank you very much. In summary, we have navigating the balance between self-sufficiency and open trade. We've got the concept of mutual benefit, social economic prosperity, and also the environmental aspects. And we have the right policies and enablement for the private sector to be able to innovate and drive technological innovation. So Thank you very much for this insightful conversation, and looking forward to engaging further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.